Okay, the first mistake I want to talk about is forgetting to lock my focus. This silly mistake had me throwing away images from a couple of nights and was quite frustrating. This one is a real head slapper because it involves one of the most important things in astrophotography, focus. So what was my mistake? I forgot to lock my focus tightly. The problem with focus of a telescope is that it can change with temperature and always needs adjusting before every imaging session. I left my focus loose, and as the night progressed, the focus obviously slipped, and most of my images were completely out of focus and totally useless. I had to delete them. It took me 2 nights of this, can you believe, before I finally realized exactly what the problem was. But what did I learn from this mistake? I've learned that pinpoint focus is necessary for each imaging session, and it is well worth checking well. Then, most importantly of all, I need to lock down the tightening knob before imaging through the night. By doing this last step, I've totally solved this silly mistake. The second mistake is a common one, and it is basically buying a telescope that's not designed for astrophotography. This mistake is often made by beginners, and I did it too. Here's what happened to me. I bought a Celestron 130 SLT reflector telescope with the aim of using it visually and then for astrophotography. As a beginner, I was blissfully unaware that it wouldn't be suitable for astrophotography. I discovered this when I tried to connect my camera and saw that it was quite impossible to reach focus. Whoops! I found out that most telescopes are designed for visual use and cannot be used for astrophotography. So I looked for a solution. I could have panicked, and I did in fact find a solution. The solution, though, sounded a bit harsh because it was suggesting that I should cut my new telescope tube and shorten it so that the primary mirror would be closer to the secondary mirror. In other words, to reach focus with a camera, the mirror would have to be moved forward a few centimeters. This didn't sound like something I wanted to do with my brand new telescope, so I managed to find another answer. I will include a link to a video I found on YouTube, which really helped me because it showed me how to 3D print 3 clips that I could use to hold the mirror in place, replacing the existing plastic clips. And this would in fact move the mirror forward because these clips were a little bit longer. This actually saved my life to the point where I still use this telescope tube today, although I've changed the mount and other parts of my setup. The moral of this story is to check carefully before you buy a telescope that it can be used for astrophotography if that's something that you want to look at. The third mistake that I want to talk about is a classic howler that doesn't just happen to beginners. We've all done this, and my puzzled look soon became a quiet chuckle when I understood what just happened. I've done this while trying to polar align. Mysteriously, the stars that I should be seeing were not there. I looked at the screen and it said 0 stars detected. It normally detects about 50 stars or more. Oh no, what could be happening now, I wondered. Another disaster? No, it's head slap time again. I forgot to remove the lens cap on my guide scope that I use for polar alignment with Sharpcap. I have a video about polar alignment with Sharpcap if you don't know what this is. Check the link in the description below. Yeah, leaving the lens cap on is a really big and silly mistake that happens far too frequently. The next mistake is to expect the impossible from your astrophotography equipment. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about a telescope or what you think you'll see in your camera as you point it at a distant object, such as a nebula or galaxy, or even as a planet. The next mistake, this is number 4, is to expect the impossible from your astrophotography equipment, be it a telescope or what you think you'll see in your camera as you point it at a distant object, such as a nebula or galaxy or even a planet. Most beginners often think that the amazing pictures that we see online of galaxies and other objects in the sky are what we will see in the eyepiece of our small telescopes, but this is far from the case. I was under the impression that when I selected an object on my remote control, my telescope would move and I'd see that beautiful image in front of my eyes with all its color and glory. Now I know that this is absolutely an unrealistic expectation. The reality is that amazing object will either be totally invisible to your eye or will be a very faint grey smudge. What a huge disappointment. Unless you use a very large aperture telescope of, say, 25 inches or more, you're not going to see much at all until you take long exposures, and many of them. Then once you have hours of photographic data, you stack them on your computer to get an amazing image. This mistake is based on a common misunderstanding of astronomy and tools like telescopes and cameras. So now you know. Finally, we come to our fifth blunder that beginners often make in astrophotography. I know this one sounds obvious, but really it isn't. I set my astrophotography rig up and started to photograph my target. I checked the images that I had captured after about 20 minutes and saw that each one of them had star trailing and blurring. I had to scrap all of these images, checked everything, and tried again. To make matters worse, it was cold that night. Why do most mistakes seem to happen when it's cold? An hour later, and the same thing happened again. I set about trying to fix this, and finally I gave up for the night. Later I thought about it a lot. What had changed? Absolutely nothing that I could think of. Wait a minute. I had placed my rig on the grass, but it had recently rained. When I rechecked my polar alignment, it was way out, though I had set it correctly as normal, barely an hour earlier. Ha! I know what happened. My telescope setup and tripod had sunk, especially on one side. This was absolutely clear once I checked closely and looked at the ground. Next time, unless it has been very dry for a while, I'll be sure to set up on a flat, hard surface. When I did this the next time I went out, I had no problems. Another silly error which ruined a night's imaging. But I suppose we learn from all these mistakes, don't we? I think I've been really honest about some of the common beginners' mistakes, and I've explained how I made them. Before I go today, I'd be very interested to hear from you about what mistakes you've made in astrophotography. It's definitely a good chance for us to learn from each other. So please take a moment and share some of your errors. Share them with us below. By the way, if you enjoyed this video and you've got some value from it, please give me a thumbs up and do subscribe to see more of my future videos. Thanks in advance for your support and see you next time.